This project is supported by a grant from the Emergence Foundation and by the College of Medicine, the Woking and Sambir Hospice and the Harmony Project. I am Chris Lofthouse, the HILDA project manager, and we're going to start with a short silent meditation. Well, we'll begin. Tonight with me are Dr. Eleni, the HILDA project lead, a consultant in palliative medicine at Woking Hospice, and an Ayurveda practitioner and Hippocrates researcher. Dr. Michael Dixon, the chair of the College of Medicine and the Harmony in Health and Wellbeing lead at the Prince's Trust. Mr. Tim Stokes, the chairman of Woking Hospice, and Tural Shah, the founder of Urban Kitchen, a nutritional scientist and cancer survivor. Our co-facilitators for the workshops are Mr. Richard Dunn, the Harmony in Education lead, Miss Rona Byrne, fundraiser for Woking Hospice and an holistic coach, and Dr. Jackie Phillips, a palliative care doctor and yoga therapist. We will hear two introductions by Dr. Dixon and Mr. Stokes, a short introduction to HILDA and beauty by Dr. Eleni, and a cookery presentation by Ms. Tural Shah, followed by a discussion in breakout rooms on harmony in living and dying approach and beauty and cooking. The discussions in the breakout rooms will not be recorded. Just follow the simple on-screen instructions to join the rooms, and at the end to come back to the main session. Now, without further ado, please allow me to hand over to Dr. Michael Dixon to say a few words, and then Tim Stokes. Thank you. Michael.
Thank you, Chris, and what a wonderful meditation, which was enhanced, not interrupted this evening in Devon by wild bird song outside my window. And I want to welcome you all to the HILDA project this evening, which is supported very strongly by the College of Medicine, and particular congratulations to Dr. Eleni, who is our Harmony in Living and Dying lead, and amazingly got this grant from the Emergence Foundation to allow us to bring everything that you see here tonight. My name, as Chris said, is Michael Dixon. I'm a GP in Devon. I'm chair of the College of Medicine, medical advisor to the Prince of Wales, and furiously supportive of creating a more harmonious world. And I believe that this project is an essential part of doing that. It all started with a book which some of you may have read called Harmony by the Prince of Wales, which a number of us contributed to. It spans a vast area from agriculture to geometry to the various different religions to health. And I think 10 years later, it's probably more relevant today than in a way it ever was, because I don't need to tell you, but we are living today in a world that's too full of disharmony. COVID-19, people, fighting over loo rolls on the one hand. On the other hand, volunteers, 750,000 coming out of the woodwork. But how do we begin to make sense out of this? And from the words of the book and the concepts behind harmony, we now need to start turning the talking and the theorizing into action. And that's really what we're hoping to do with you tonight. Because I believe, and I'm seeing harmony walking the talk, looking at what harmony looks like in practice for the living and the dying. Of course, drawing on ancient wisdom, but also on modern science. And using practices which are ancient but seem almost modern, such as dancing and storytelling. And this is the strength, I think, of what Eleni is bringing to the whole agenda of harmony. And it's not about left brain, it's about very much right brain. It's about feelings, it's about emotions, it's about empathy. And what I see as unique but extraordinary is the way that Eleni sees the dying as a sacred experience, but one that can make living all the more intense because of it. And probably many of you here will have experienced that yourselves. But even this evening, phoned by somebody whose mother was dying, I was made too aware of some of the messages that we're going to hear about tonight. But of course, Harmony goes wider still. It's about sustainable farming. It's about harmony between mind and body. It's about creating harmonious communities that create health rather than make us ill. And that goes all the way to climate change, harmony between us human beings and our own climate. It's not something that we can start telling everyone what it is and what to do. It's something that we need to co-create as peers. And that's really what this is about tonight. It's about us creating our own experience and sharing our experiences and making it relevant to us all, not something that's handed down. Nature and beauty are, of course, totally intrinsic to that, and that's what the discussion tonight is about. And all I can say is I'm really delighted to support and be part of Dr. Eleni's workshop tonight on nature and beauty, and I look forward to learning much about it.
And Tim would like to say a few words, please.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you, Michael, for that introduction. My name is Tim Stokes, and it's an honour for me to be Chair of Woking Hospice, and it's a pleasure for me to join you all this evening. I'm really pleased to be here supporting the HILDA project. I should make it clear, though, that I come at this not with a clinical or healthcare background, but after a career in the construction materials industry, moving from selling products into marketing, sustainability, and corporate communications. I may therefore come at this with a different approach, but I think it's important that we have different perspectives. And I think different perspectives can be helpful as we look forward to working out together how best we can take the HILDA project forward. Woking Hospice is in northwest Surrey, covering some affluent areas, but also, and a surprise to many, some of the most deprived areas in the country. Our communities are diverse in their backgrounds, cultures, beliefs, and ethnicity, and we provide care and support equally to all. A hospice is a place that provides a harmonious environment at the end of a person's life. Our team works to ensure that everything is provided for, medicine as it should be practiced. Every year, we provide care for around 2,000 patients, their carers, families, with about 70% of our work delivered in people's homes in the community. All care we provide is given free of charge, thanks to the funding from our clinical commissioning group and from the over £3 million we raise each year through charitable activity, which really is people in our communities contributing to the work we do, including people like me running the London Marathon last time that took place. It comes as a surprise to many that hospices are charities and they're not part of the National Health Service. We are, however, intricately linked with our NHS colleagues, and at Woking Hospice we are working with the NHS by collaborating with our local health providers to be the hub for palliative care and end-of-life care provision in our area of northwest Surrey, a responsibility we take incredibly seriously. We want to and will play our full part in developing palliative and end-of-life care with the NHS and other related organisations to the future benefit of all. HILDA is about lifting the idea of death out of the negative and into the positive. Understandably, many will ask how this can be done. What is a good death? And how can we prepare today during our living for a good death? And yet many of our staff say how grateful they are and what a privilege it is to be treating someone at the end of their life. It is as important as birth. 2 years ago, we started at our hospice Harmony Circles, and Richard Dunn, who joins us tonight, the Harmony in Education lead, came 18 months ago to one of these circles and spoke to over 30 people, and I was one of them. Harmony Circles were staff and trustees meeting, sitting in a circle, exploring what harmony meant for us. Just having the space to exchange and connect with each other was a positive experience. It connected clinical and non-clinical staff who came out from their roles to reveal how they were interested in a more meaningful and, for some, the spiritual aspects of hospice work. So the idea of harmony is perhaps in all of us. It helps us to connect and introduce a new and yet old way of looking at our work. So this evening, perhaps, is about planting a seed in each of us. Who knows, perhaps a movement around how harmony can develop. We may be able to discuss how to progress and take this work forward in our workshops. It's with great pleasure now that I ask Dr. Eleni to speak. She's a consultant doctor and a friend and much respected colleague at Woking Hospice, and someone who is supporting the work with our NHS partners and working hard and with a real passion to drive forward the harmony concept. Dr. Eleni.
Thank you, Tim, for that wonderful, lovely introduction. I will share my screen now. Can you hear me well? Chris, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Fine.
Thank you. So I've been a doctor for 30 years, 20 of them working in palliative care with dying people in hospices, in hospitals, and in people's homes in the community. It was after reading the book that Michael mentioned by the Prince of Wales, Harmony, a new way of looking at our world, and very good book. I suggest, if you want to read it, that I was inspired to introduce harmony into the work with dying people and connected to living. I want to acknowledge here the work we have been doing with our sister group, the Harmony in Health team. It's a transdisciplinary team of professionals from various backgrounds. Today we had a workshop on long COVID where more than 100 people joined. In Harmony in Health, we look at the human being as a whole, not as a collection of different parts that need to be fixed separately: lungs, brain, heart, gut. We are not a diagnosis. We are not just a collection of symptoms. We are made of the same elements as everything in nature, and we are connected to the environment around us and other people. This approach has been practiced since time immemorial by all ancient wisdom traditions, by Hippocrates, the father of medicine in ancient Greece, Ayurveda and other Indian traditional medicines, Chinese medicine, Native American and African healing traditions, and others around the world. They all promoted health and well-being by using a range of holistic treatments that treated the whole system, treatments that we use in the hospice care as well. We are mind, body, and heart, and some would say also spirit. When these are in balance and connected, we are harmonious. Because the miracle of life and the mystery of dying are interconnected, we are here today with HILDA. As Epicurus said, the art of living well and dying well are one, and we all want a good death. Harmony, as I said, is a concept that is found in many ancient wisdom traditions around the world. Hippocrates and Pythagoras said that health is harmony, is the balance of different elements in the body. In our modern world, however, in the West, many people are not religious or spiritual, but they feel a strong connection to nature. People can relate when we talk to them about harmony and nature. This sense of something bigger than us, which some people call nature, others call spirit, others call God, has helped many patients at the end of life and has helped me personally relate to them. A couple of years ago, I was visiting with a nurse, a dying woman with lung cancer at her home in the community. She hadn't been able to have any discussions with her family or healthcare professionals about her dying, and her family and us found it difficult as they watched her deteriorate. They and us hadn't managed to have any discussion with her about her decline, and we couldn't prepare her for her death, find out what she was thinking, whether she was afraid of something, where she wanted to be at the end. I remember it was autumn, and as we were talking in her sitting room with a big glass door, I said to her, looking outside at the autumnal trees with their falling leaves, that everything in nature comes in cycles. Leaves fall, plants die, and come back to life in the spring. We were able, through this discussion, through this opening, through nature, to talk about her coming end. She was able to verbalize and acknowledge to me and the nurse that she was dying. And she wasn't afraid. She just hadn't found a way, an opening to talk about it. In his book, His Royal Highness writes, "By turning to nature as our teacher, we are better placed to tackle the challenges facing humanity. And what bigger challenge than facing one's own death?" We all need to be thinking about death and dying and how we might take responsibility to care for ourselves and our loved ones when the time comes that we or they are dying. As the Dalai Lama says in his book, Advice on Dying and Living a Better Life, which is a very good book, I think, to make life meaningful, acceptance of old age and death as part of our life is crucial. Some philosophers and spiritual teachers suggest that we should be thinking of death every day, not in a morbid way, but to make life, the miracle of life, more apparent to us. So the sooner we start in our life to think of death, the better. As Tim said, in the last 2 years at the hospice and later on Zoom, we've had the Harmony Circles and the HILDA workshops where we try to pose meaningful questions about the end of life. What we want to do with HILDA is engage the public and professionals to approach death and dying through the wider positive spectrum of harmony and within the context of learning to live fully. We think that this way we will be able to create a community of people who inspire each other to live consciously, while preparing for our sacred time of dying. My colleagues and I, when we enter the room of a dying person, we are often very quiet, very silent, respecting the space that we are entering. I personally always have a sense that I'm entering a sacred space. Despite all that, we want to make things practical. That's why we used in our previous event geometry. We drew together this flower of life. And in our last event, we used dance, storytelling. We told a story to the bees that relates to dying, meditation, and cooking today with Toro. Although we like intellectual exchanges, we want to go back to the original meaning of the word wise. In ancient Greek, Sophia. Wise, sophos, in ancient Greek means someone who knows how to do something well. In that sense, someone who can prepare a good meal is wise, who can make a table out of wood, who can clean someone and make them comfortable when they can't do it for themselves. They are wise. The healthcare assistants at the hospice are wise. They take such good care looking after a person. The people who can knit a beautiful pattern and engage in a conversation that lifts the spirit, they are wise. So we want to bring and acknowledge practical wisdom in our work. We also want to cultivate certain daily practices such as meditation, periods of stillness and silence, active listening, which is so important in our work with the dying, mindful drawing, awareness during preparing and eating food, rituals of doing something together, such as eating or drinking when we are allowed, touch awareness, natural exercises, and grounding through gardening or walks in nature. We believe that by following, we actually have experienced it, we know it, that by following such practices, something can be re energized in us, something opens up our heart, and then a conscious realization of the miracle of living can take place, even for someone who is dying. With learning to do such daily mindful practices, we can be inspired to live fully in the here and now, to simply be. We can become more prepared to have meaningful insights into the sacred mystery of death and the complex process of dying. Beauty is important. William Wordsworth writes about nature. For she can so inform the mind that is within us, so impress with quietness and beauty, and so feed with lofty thoughts, that neither evil tongues, rash judgments, nor the sneers of selfish men, nor greetings where no kindness is, nor all the dreary intercourse of daily life shall ever prevail against us, or disturb our cheerful faith that all which we behold is full of blessings. Pardon my English. We can all connect to nature. We know what William Wordsworth says. We feel the benefits of being outdoors in green, beautiful areas. And classical architecture, traditional designs and materials, such as wood and stone, can also transform our experience. We feel it when we visit an ancient site like the Acropolis. We recognize beauty in spaces with natural light and traditional styles. We wonder at natural patterns found in a flower or a pine cone or a seashell, which reveal to us their beauty in their simplicity and geometry. In contrast, hospitals, with their sterile, crowded, and noisy environments, can be difficult places to achieve healing. In contrast, hospices are often designed to create a beautiful, more gentle, natural atmosphere. About a couple of years ago, a terminally ill patient who was transferred to our hospice from the hospital said to me, "The hospice is a peaceful environment where I have natural light in my room. I can open the door and have fresh air, and I can listen to the trees and birds outside." With a renewed feeling of hope, this dying man expressed how harmony is practiced in our hospice. With these words, I leave you. Our next event is going to be on how we die and how we live. We're going to approach how we are all different and we experience death and dying in different ways. We're going to relate that to the different types as discussed in Hippocrates and Ayurveda with my colleague who is tonight here, Jackie Phillips. We're going to do some mindful exercises. So we'll hand over to Toral now, who is our chef, but not only, and she's going to talk to us about a very good dish for someone who is not well, but other things as well.
Thank you so much, Eleni and the HILDA project for inviting me to share this evening with you and to speak a little bit about food and my own journey and how food is just so much more than something that feeds our bodies. It nourishes our mind, it nourishes our soul, and I really wanted to share something that reflected that. So you might have seen me sort of darting off to the side every few minutes because I'm making something called kheer, which is you'll see it shortly. It's almost like an Indian rice pudding. We're using a very different type of rice. We're using a basmati rice. And I'll talk to you more about that in a minute. But I just wanted to share a little bit about me. I met Dr. Eleni, I want to say 17 years ago when we were both studying for our masters in nutritional medicine. And during the period of that course, we became friends, but also at the end of the talk part of that course, I was actually diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 29. So cancer and nutrition and kind of some of the work that looking at how you live with conditions like that became really important to me, not just professionally, but also personally. And the reason I was so interested in cancer and nutrition and these things is because my mother had breast cancer. And at that time, I was at medical school thinking about becoming an oncologist. And obviously that changed the experience of my mother having breast cancer really changed kind of where I felt I wanted to be in life. And so this kind of really leads me back to us cooking food. I think that food's so important, as we said, not just to nourish our bodies, but also our minds and our souls. We eat not just with our mouths, we eat with probably all our senses. The smell of food is so important, how it looks, the taste of it, the texture of it on our mouth. And obviously these things really change when you're having treatment like chemotherapy, you've had surgery, you're not feeling well, you're not able to digest. Our taste buds change, how we eat changes. And sometimes food's just not very tempting. So this is actually a very traditional Indian dish, which I've adapted slightly. I've used saffron, and I really want to go back to what Michael was saying about the harmony with our environment. For me, that's very important, being very sustainable with what we eat and how we eat. So I'm just going to put my little pot back and just keep stirring. So one of the things that I've used, and you'll see the very yellow color, I don't know if you can see, yeah, the very yellow color of the kheer, which is I've used saffron. So saffron was actually discovered in Greece, which is very relevant today with it being Greece Independence Day. And this particular saffron is from somewhere called Wonder Workshop, a brand that works with agroforestry and really in a sustainable way. But this is from Afghanistan, and they really work with the UN, with women, to create communities. So they're not growing opium and other things, but they're growing saffron instead. So they're working with a whole lot of other communities, including the fashion industry, to grow this saffron in a really ethical and sustainable way. And saffron, which you won't be able to smell, I wish we had smell vision, but this particular saffron, which I will try and show you, is very, very long strands, kind of red. This is the stamen of the crocus flower, and it's incredibly full of antioxidants. So it's really important. It's very nutritious for our health. It's said to have anti-cancer properties too, help with reduce inflammation, and to help with mood and memory and depression. So it's a really powerful, potent herb, I guess you would call it, or spice. And then I've used some rose water. So I've used some organic rose water. Again, really mindful of the fact that roses, when they're grown in Africa, in Kenya, often where my family are from, often grow with lots of pesticides and that can be really damaging to the environment. So I'm just really conscious of some of the ingredients we're using. I'm also using cardamom seeds, which is really important in lots of cooking in lots of different countries, but I know that they use it in India and Asia and Greece as well. So really important herb and spice. So when you are struggling and you're not feeling very well, sometimes there's issues with taste, there's issues with swallowing, there may be issues with digestion. So I've tried to create something that you would help anyone who's not feeling very well, and also give someone a little bit of energy. So with this kheer, this rice, which I will plate up in a minute because it should be ready, what I've done is I've used basmati rice. And in Western cultures, you use a lot of different types of rice, which is much more similar to the rice that you use for risotto or something. It's much smaller around, or pudding rice. In our Indian culture, we often use basmati rice because that's what people have at home. And what I did was I soaked it and then I ground it up in a little food processor. The finer you grind it, the quicker it cooks, and obviously the softer it is in the palate. I've done a bit of a coarse grind because I like a little bit of texture. So I soaked it for 20 minutes and then I just was grinding it. And then with saffron, the great idea is you want to toast it a little bit in a pan for literally maybe 30 seconds or a minute. And then when it's slightly toasted, soak it in 2 or 3 tablespoons of hot water. That will release that beautiful kind of orangey amber color. And that means that the saffron is able to kind of let out all its diffusion flavor, but also other antioxidants too. So that's what I did first of all. Then I heated up some milk and I brought it to the boil and I let it simmer for, he brought it to the boil, then I did the saffron and then I let it simmer for about 25 to 30 minutes until it was starting to get slightly thicker. So again, good quality organic milk. If you don't want to use dairy milk, you can use plant-based milk and it'll work equally well. You just need to make sure you have to keep stirring it. So this is quite a mindful activity because you need to be careful that the milk doesn't catch to the bottom of the pan. And I think that's really important. So that's what we're doing. That's what I did. And then when that milk is slightly thickened down and was really fragrant, I added in my cardamom seeds, which I just ground up. And then I slowly, tablespoon by tablespoon, added in my ground or kind of blitz up basmati rice. Then you keep stirring it. So like baking risotto, it's very mindful. You need to be standing there and watching it. So which is why I keep having to dart off and sort of stir, because you need to make sure it doesn't catch the bottom of the pan and there is enough liquid in the pan. So you keep cooking it for about 25 to 30 minutes, well, probably 30 to 35 minutes. And I added a little bit of sugar because it does need a little bit just to bring it out. And then I've made a little syrup of pomegranates and raspberry and rose water, which is actual optional. You could just, not do that. It was a little bit more complicated, where I just let it cook down, then I just put it through a sieve and just pressed it through until it became a puree, and then I added the rose water in, cooked it down a bit. So I want to plate this up. I feel really bad that you guys can't taste it. I would love you to taste it. But I will share the recipe as a PDF And if any of you are on Instagram or social media, I'm at the Urban Kitchen, and you'll be able to see it there as well. I don't know if everyone can see me on full screen or whether Elaine's still on full screen. I'm not sure. Oops. So you don't need to have a massive portion. Just want to take this off the heat. Now I'm just going to drizzle over a little bit of this puree. And then I've got a few leftover pomegranate seeds. So I'm just going to, give me 1 second, I'm just going to get a little kitchen roll. So for me, the interest in how do we nourish our bodies, A, to prevent disease, but then what happens once we have the disease? What can we do ourselves to help both get ourselves through treatment and then recover from treatment and then live well? And that's been something I've been pondering on for the last probably 25 years of my life. And I don't know if you can see the finished dish. Is that possible to see? So it's also tipping over a bit. So for me, just really understanding that, because at all these different stages, your needs are different. Your nutritional needs are different. Maybe your tastes are different. Like, for example, at the moment, I've actually, and I'll share a little bit my own story. I had breast cancer, as I shared, 15 years ago, and then had a reoccurrence 3 years ago, and I had another one last year. And so I've literally just finished radiotherapy. So for me, it's been really interesting because I had major surgery again this time, and my appetite was so low, which is really unlike me because I'm a real foodie and I love food and I'm passionate about cooking. And so creating dishes like this, which are easily digestible, especially because I had a diet flap, which means that they took some skin from my stomach and made a new breast. My stomach was quite delicate. So all of these things make a real difference. So having food that, A, you want to eat because it looks beautiful, B, it smells gorgeous, and then I will answer that question in a minute. I'm going to have to walk around because I can't quite see it. And then actually tastes good. It has that mouthfeel. And I'm actually going to taste it for you just to kind of show you the texture. It's really, really soft, but it's still quite thick. So it's a dropping consistency. And this is the kind of thing that even if you made a batch and left it to have cold, it's actually quite nice cold, especially in the sun. And actually in some Indian cultures, they do eat it cold. But I think, particularly if you're not feeling very well, this is a really delicate, warming dish that will easily be digested, particularly if you grind the rice really finely. I just haven't for myself. And then you can add any other toppings to it as well. It will work equally well, you know, it's breakfast, it'll work equally well for someone like midday who's not able to eat that much, and it's got lots of nourishment. So from my own story, it's been really interesting just to observe where I lost my taste buds at the very beginning. Nothing tasted very good after my surgery for, you know, all sorts of reasons, and slowly getting more appetite and slowly having more taste. And that made such a difference. And the kind of type of food I wanted to eat also changed. I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to talk too much longer. But this is why food is something that we probably need to think about a little bit more at different stages. And I wish that we could work with hospitals and hospices so we could improve the food, because food is such an important part of how we heal. And for me, I made sure that I ate lots of healing foods for wound healing, with lots of zinc and vitamin C and things like that. And everyone kept saying, you know, oh, you're healing so quickly. I was like, well, you know, I'm also making sure I'm eating the right foods and protein obviously as well. So I think it's also those things too. I'm going to whiz round because I can see there's a question, but I just can't read it from the kitchen. So give me 1 second. What shops can you buy the saffron? Which let's start. So the brand is called Wonder Workshop. I'll share this with Eleni, or I'll put it up.
Yeah, sorry, Dad, we will.
Yeah, and it's basically you buy lots of different health food shops and different places like that, and directly from their website. And what's lovely is that it really supports women and therefore their community. So it's that whole harmony in being. It looks after the environment, it looks after the communities. And for me, all of these, how I shop is really important, because I think creating harmony in looking after sustainable farming is super important too, not just for our, the planet's health, but for our health too. And we're all interconnected. So I know they're very short of time. So I don't know if there are any questions, or Eleni, we can direct them maybe later to us.
Yes, are there any questions?
I will share the recipe with you.
Yes, we'll email it.
Yes. Right, I know you're eager to go into your break room, so I'm going to...
Thank you, Toral. Thank you for sharing the rice pudding. It's something that I often advise patients and relatives to cook because it's easily digestible if it is cooked with all the spices you said.
Yes.
Like almost everyone. I don't know if the facilitators have something that they want to share with the rest of us, and as we're nearing the end of this workshop.
Eleni, we had a really lovely session, fascinating, interesting perspectives on this whole idea of living and dying. And for me, the message that came out very strongly was, how do we open up these conversations at an earlier stage, that we can have, a serious illness or a cancer or something that really triggers us to think about our mortality, but how can we bring that into our lives in terms of discussing it, being more aware of it at a younger age, so that we almost carpe diem, seize the day more in terms of how we then live once we have that better understanding. And so we were talking about some of the ways in which we might do that through intergenerational conversations, through some of your work going more out into the community, which we've already touched on before, haven't we? So just creative ways to engage with this wider conversation.
Thank you. In our group, Richard, we said that we need to go to schools to talk about death and dying.
Absolutely, I agree.
In our group, I'd like to echo what Richard said, that we did say that, a great deal about, how we live our lives and how that impacts how we end our lives is so important. And starting our conversations with friends and family is so important. So, we talked about very much the same thing, but we talked a lot about there's no time like the present, and a discussion about how living a life that is good, that you feel is good, it can help people approach death and have a good death. And we talked a bit about how, whatever background, cultural background you come from, we had amongst us, people from all different cultural backgrounds and faiths, but ultimately it all comes down to that at our core is an essence, and that maybe now in this world that we're living in, which has become much more material, that this approach of harmony, looking at our sort of connection and our oneness with beauty and nature, can be a way of trying to get to that essence and meet people wherever they are. Where we all are spiritually can be very different, but just meeting people where they are, this approach through beauty and oneness and interconnection could be a really good way of helping to connect with that inner core, that essence that people have. Have I reflected that well, my group? Anybody want to add?
Similar also in our group, we talked about how important it is that we don't have regrets, and there is a sense of contentment and appreciation.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, in our group as well, we talked about the essence of the individual and how the beauty within And we had an interesting conversation about how no matter what age you are, you see yourself in the same way, you're that same person. And we want others to see us in that way. And we talked about how it's important so that other people know what your likes and dislikes are, and that you share that with people even from a young age, that people know what you like and you don't like. We also talked a lot about how this last year has helped people focus a lot more on the beauty in nature and the small things in life that are important rather than the material things. It's more about the walks in the park, listening to the birds, seeing nature, looking at flowers. And we also talked about how children help us to do that, because they have that wonder for everything, and also animals like pets like dogs and things where they've got that excitement and that. And then we kind of then talked about the whole mindfulness thing, about how we live often in our heads, and that if we bring ourselves back to this moment, how that can help us to live, and it can also help when somebody is dying. So we had a wonderful conversation. I could talk all night about our conversation, but I won't. But I wanted to make those points. So hopefully, and that covered the main points for the people in my group as well. Thank you.
And in our group, really, like people have said, the chance to really have a natural conversation about dying as early as possible. And the other things were finding different ways for people to support themselves and raising people's awareness of actually how they feel, and maybe gentle breathing or movements and actual practice and awareness of the body can help, with the suggestions from our group. But the overriding message really was the natural conversation about dying as early as possible, and which echoes what other people have said.
Thank you. This was an amazing interaction we had tonight. I hope you come to the next one and develop this conversation further and develop this project. I want to invite you to think of someone close to you who either has died or is suffering, and light a candle, and we'll think of them for a few seconds. Thank you very much, everyone.